Medieval India, page number 98. The advent of Portuguese. The landing of Vasco da Gama at Calicut in 1498 with two ships with a Gujarati pilot, Abdul Majid, aboard, who had guided the ships from the African coast to Calicut, has often been considered the beginning of a new phase during which the control of the ocean passed into the hands of the Europeans. Indian trade and traders received a setback, and ultimately the Europeans were able to establish their colonial rule and dominion over India, most of the neighboring countries. This picture has been seriously called into question both by Western and Indian historians, especially after World War II and the end of European political rule over the countries into the region. Before we assess the impact of Portuguese on Indian society, economy, and politics, let us first examine the factors which brought the Portuguese to India. Very broadly, the Portuguese came to India at the time when European economy was growing rapidly thanks to the expansion of land under cultivation on account of the drainage of marshes and cutting of forests. The introduction of an improved plough and a more scientific rotation of crops, which also led to an increase in the supply of meat. The growth was reflected in the rise of towns and increase of trade, both internal and external. Since Roman times, there had been a steady demand for Oriental goods. These included silk from China, spices and drugs from India and Southeast Asia. With the economic revival, this demand increased, and especially the demand for pepper and spices, which were needed to make meat palatable, since due to shortage of fodder, much of the cattle had to be slaughtered during winter. Pepper was brought to Levant, Egypt, and the Black Sea ports overland and partly by sea from India and Southeast Asia. With the rise of the power of the Ottoman Turks from the early part of 15th century, all these areas came under the control of the Turks. Thus, they captured Constantinople in 1453 and Syria and Egypt later. The Turks were not opposed to trade, but the virtual monopoly over pepper established by them was bound to work against the Europeans. The expansion of the Turkish power towards the Eastern Europe and the growth of the Turkish navy, which made the Eastern Mediterranean a Turkish lake, also alarmed the Europeans. Venice and Geneva, which had been the most active in trade of Oriental goods, were too small to stand up to Turks. Venice, in particular, quickly came to terms with the Turks. The banner of struggle against the Turkish danger was therefore taken up by the powers in the western part of Mediterranean, Spain and Portugal. They were aided with money and men by North Europeans and by ships and technical knowledge by the Genoese, who were the rivals of Venice. It was not the Portuguese alone, but all these elements which started the search for a direct sea route to India, and hence started the era of naval discoveries, including the discovery of America by Genoese, Christopher Columbus, or rediscovery because Norsemen from the north had reached America earlier, as also the Red Indians across the Bering Straits. The work of the Portuguese ruler Dom Henrique, generally called Henry the Navigator, should be seen in this context. From 1418, Prince Henry set out 2 to 3 ships every year to explore the western coast of Africa and to search out a sea route to India. His objects were twofold. First, to oust the Arabs as well as his European rivals, the Venetians, from the rich eastern trade, and the second, to counterpoise the growing power of Turks and Arabs by converting the heathens of Africa and Asia to Christianity. Both the objectives were steadily pursued. In fact, they justified and supported each other. The Pope lent his support by issuing a bull in 1453 by which he granted to Portugal in perpetuity. Whatever land they discovered beyond Cape Nor in Africa up to India on the condition of converting to Christianity the peoples of those lands. In 1487, Bartholomew Diaz rounded the Cape of Good Hope and laid the basis of direct trade links between Europe and India. Such long sea voyages were made possible by a number of remarkable inventions, notably the mariner's compass and astrolabe for navigation by the day. Neither of them was a European invention. The mariner's compass was known to the Chinese several centuries earlier, but was not widely used. The astrolabe was, however, widely used by Arabs, Indians, and others. Nor were the European ships superior in construction to the ships such as the Chinese junks used in Asian waters at that time. The spirit of daring and enterprise displayed by the Europeans was certainly new. This spirit has been traced back to the revival and growth of trade and commerce from the 13th century onwards, leading to intense rivalry among European states. As important was the new intellectual stirring called the Renaissance. The Renaissance signified, above all, a spirit of independent investigation rather than basing oneself either on the revealed word or on the wisdom enshrined in the church. These developments led to the rapid assimilation, dispersal, and improvement of other foreign Arab and Chinese inventions such as the gunpowder, printing, telescope, etc. Developments in metallurgy led to the production of better quality guns. Vasco da Gama landed at Calicut in 1498 with a Gujarati pilot on board. The strong colony of the Arab merchants settled there was hostile, but the Zamorin welcomed the Portuguese and allowed them to take pepper, drugs, etc. on board. In Portugal, the goods brought by Gama were computed at 60 times the cost of entire expedition. Despite this, direct trade between India and Europe grew slowly. One reason for this was the monopoly exercised by Portuguese government. From the beginning, the Portuguese rulers were determined to treat the Eastern trade as royal monopoly, excluding not only rival nations in Europe and Asia, but also private Portuguese traders. Alarmed at the growing power of Portuguese, the Sultan of Egypt fitted a fleet and sent it towards India. The fleet was joined by a contingent of ships from the ruler of Gujarat. After an initial victory in which the son of Portuguese governor Don Almeida was killed, this combined fleet was routed by Portuguese in 1509. This made the Portuguese navy supreme in Indian Ocean for the time being and enabled the Portuguese to extend their operations towards the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea. Shortly afterwards, Albuquerque succeeded as the governor of Portuguese possession in the east. He advocated and embarked upon a policy of dominating the entire Oriental commerce by setting up forts at various strategic places in Asia and Africa. This was to be supplemented by a strong navy. Defending his philosophy, he wrote, "A dominion founded on a navy alone cannot last. Lacking forts, he urged, neither will they trade or be in friendly terms with you." Albuquerque initiated his new policy by capturing Goa from Bijapur in 1510. The land of Goa was excellent natural harbour and fort. It was strategically located, and from it the Portuguese could command the Malabar trade and watch the policies of the rulers in Deccan. It was also near enough to Gujarat seaports for the Portuguese to make their presence felt there. Goa was thus suited to be the principal center of Portuguese commercial and political activity in the east. The Portuguese were also able to extend their possession on the mainland opposite Goa. and to blockade and sack the Bijapuri ports of Danda, Rajuri and Dabhol, thus paralyzing Bijapur's sea trade. From their base at Goa, the Portuguese further strengthened their position by establishing a fort at Colombo in Sri Lanka and at Achin in Sumatra and Malacca port, which controlled the exit and entry to the narrow gulf between the Malay Peninsula and Sumatra. The Portuguese also established a station at the island of Socotra at the mouth of Red Sea, besieged Aden, and forced the ruler of Ormuz, which controlled entry into the Persian Gulf, to permit them to establish a fort there. Thank you everyone for tuning in. In the next part, we'll start with the last paragraph on page number 100. All the best for exams. Do share and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. And on your screen, you can find the links to the previous videos for the starting of this chapter. And if you want to study modern India, we have covered it as well. Thank you for watching. All the best.